It's 1938 and the village of St Eval is demolished to make way for what was going to be one of the busiest airfields in Britain during World War II. What was being built here was one of the many coastal airfields that played one of the most important roles in defending Britain during the war. The first runway laid in 1938 and the additional two constructed by the Royal Canadian Engineers in the early part of the war. St Eval's primary role was to provide anti-submarine and anti-shipping patrols off the coast of England. All that exists today of the original village is the church on the north side, but this had a perfectly good reason to stay. During 1940 and immediately after Dunkirk, the Luftwaffe paid St Eval a visit almost every night. During one raid, one of the hangars behind flying control had its main door blown off. But more memorable to the men and women that served at St Eval was when 23 airmen were killed in a shelter near flying control in 1942. If the siren sounded, which was most evenings, all non-defence personnel would have to run out of the camp, down the road towards St Column until the all clear was sounded. Even through to the early 50s, unexploded bombs were being found on the airfield. At one point, a civilian contractor fitting out a new building to be used as a battery charging room reported a suspicious object in a trench he was digging for a water supply. The site was immediately evacuated and it was very lucky there was no explosion. The contractor had pierced the flight to the bomb with his pickaxe. A few feet more and the story may have ended a bit differently. During times when air raids were making considerable damage to the site, the airmen would be housed back in Newquay to prevent unnecessary casualties. Today you can still walk the ghostly footpaths between the once bustling buildings of RAF St Eval, and few have even made the houses here home for the next generation. The NAFI and the officers' mess took direct hits in 1942. The wireless in the NAFI was missed for many weeks after, until the NAFI was rebuilt. church was not only a resting place for more than 20 serving RAF personnel, but was also a key advantage point for plane spotting. The tower was connected by radio to the operations block back on the airfield. A team of 6 to 8 spotters took it in turn to relay observations back to operations on a 4-hour rotation. 2 men at a time would climb the 100 steps up to the top of the tower and through a small opening under a slate ledge onto the roof. The top of the tower was made up of a 2-foot wide passage around the outer perimeter with a slate peaked roof in the middle. To protect them from the weather, all they had was a tarpaulin over the southwest corner of the tower. Outside of the cemetery wall was their accommodation, a Nissan hut where they would spend most of their time when not on shift. Communication between the tower and the hut was very primitive. One of the observers, a Mr. Brown, managed to long-term borrow some wire and a couple of jam tins from the cookhouse and local gun position. He rigged one end to the southwest pinnacle of the tower and the other to the stovepipe in the hut. It was very effective and lasted for a couple of years. Observations started out being for the Bofors guns during raids, spotting hostile aircraft, but as the airfield became busier, it was the tower's job to count out and then back in all operational flights from the airfield. It was quite common to count more out than in towards the latter part of the war. To protect the airfield from Luftwaffe raids, St Eval was surrounded by up to 4 40mm artillery batteries, between 12 and 14 20mm Bofors. A crew of 3 would operate the 20mm guns and attempt to down unwanted attackers. One willing pilot had the role of towing a target behind his Tiger Moth, a large banner approximately 100 yards behind the Moth, so live ammunition practice could be carried out by the Bofors guns. The ground artillery never met the pilot, but they had great respect for him and said he was the bravest airman they'd ever seen, especially as their aim was not the best. A battle headquarters can be found on many airfields around the UK, and they serve the purpose of giving the defence officer a stronghold position with a clear view of the airfield, for which he and his staff could coordinate the defences of the airfield in the event of an invasion by hostile forces. The standard pattern of Battle HQ was drawn up in 1941 and was to be used on any type of airfield that had the possibility of being taken by invading forces. Directly at the end of the main passageway there was a small 3-foot by 4-foot room containing the WC for the post. This was fitted with a standard Elson toilet, the same as was fitted to the rear of British heavy bombers like the Wellington and Halifax. The first room to the left and entering the bunker from the entrance steps is the messengers and runners room. The runner would be responsible for relaying messages to the various defence units stationed around the airfield and other officers that could not be reached by local telephone network. Joining onto the runner's room is a 6-foot by 8-foot room. This was the PBX, or Public Branch Exchange Room, where any telephone equipment was located. The second room to the left of the main passage was the station commander's office. This is where the core of the operations was carried out and where all the orders were staged to secure the airfield. The openings or hatches in the walls allowed quick and efficient transfer of communication scripts to and from the messengers and radio operators. At the far end of the office is a small passage leading to a number of steps up into the observation room. Next to the observation room is the emergency exit with an iron ladder leading up to the surface. This would have had a steel cover which could be locked in a closed position. Positioned in the middle of a field between St Eval and Denzil Downs, deep within an ancient borough, the RAF built another defensive position in the shape of a Norcom pillbox. Most of the designs of shelters and defence points around St Eval are unique to the official blueprints. The main reason for this is because St Eval was one of the earlier airfields to be built, a guinea pig almost. The pillbox secures the passageway between the battle HQ and the aerials at the top of the hill. This position would have been defended with light machine guns such as the Bren. The angle of fire and the high ground advantage would have been a challenge for any invading forces. The aerials and supporting buildings at the far end of Bears Down have stood unknown since the end of 1950s, and still to this day little is known about what their exact purpose was. Aerial images suggest there was up to 9 masts at Denzil Downs during and after the war, but there is only one visible set of foundations to support one mast today. It is though known that MI9 and SOE worked closely with St Eval from 1942 until the end of the war. The wireless telegraphy mechanics were responsible for fixing any radio equipment on the flotilla down on the Halford. St Eval was also a primary choice location for SOE officers to move between Cornwall and London. Naval personnel supporting the Special Operations Executive made regular visits to St Eval to train in aircraft recognition, a very crucial skill when manoeuvring motorised fishing boats through the channel to drop supplies on the French coast. RAF St Eval closed in 1959, but not before the Americans made dramatic changes to the infrastructure around the airfield. From Whitley bombers, Blue Spitfires for reconnaissance and secret missions post-war, RAF St Eval has created a lot of memories for the service personnel who served their country from this Cornish airfield sitting only a stone's throw from Newquay itself.